Chapter 33. The X Factor. I should explain, for openers, that when I had the mumps at 14, the doctor gently advised me that afterward I would probably be sterile. I warned Deborah of that when I asked her to marry me 7 years later, but she just laughed at the idea. We had 3 daughters. Deborah and I wanted 5, but she was Rh negative, and at the time each pregnancy was considered increasingly dangerous. Anyhow, we had no guarantee that they'd all be daughters, and that's what we always wanted. Melissa was born the day after a huge Thanksgiving dinner with my folks at a restaurant in San Francisco, where I was acting with a children's theater company. I also booked us into all the Bay Area schools, including those of the Catholic Archdiocese. We did more than 500 performances of Puss in Boots, sometimes 3 a day at different schools, touring in a broken-down truck and an old station wagon and leaving our makeup on all day. We must have been quite a sight when we stopped somewhere for coffee. I know I was the night I walked into a strange doctor's office, still made up as the Marquis of Carabas, and having a massive asthma attack. I pleaded for a shot of adrenaline. Concerned and confused by my appearance, he obliged and later became our company physician. Deborah met Amy Sherrig in the maternity ward, where Amy had just given birth to her son, Clay. We spent a good deal of time afterward with Amy and her husband, Bud, who was lean and handsome and worked for Amy's father in his stationery gift shop, which Bud hated. He didn't care much for his father-in-law either. Bud's passion was golf, and he played whenever he could sneak away, which endeared him even less to Amy and her old man. Bud's other passion was poker. We were always broke, the 4 of us. I think I was making $70 a week. We managed to get by and we laughed a lot, but we were broke and it wasn't funny. Bud got into the habit of staying out late at night to gamble, and Amy and her baby took shelter with us. If she wasn't home, Bud knew where to find her, and late at night he'd show up, a little drunk, and Amy would be with us waiting for him. As her anger and anxiety subsided, Bud would fall to his knees. At first I thought he was asking for forgiveness, but then he'd reach into his pockets and pants cuffs and into his shirts and shoes and start pulling out his poker winnings, tightly crumpled dollar bills he'd stashed everywhere in case someone rolled him on the way home. We couldn't help loving the guy, and neither could Amy, and she knelt beside him, smoothing out each bill and encouraging to see if we had enough to eat. Sometimes there was over $100. Eventually, Amy and Bud divorced, and later we heard that he died. His son, Clay, looked us up once when he came to Hollywood to become a screenwriter. Deborah and Amy still keep in touch by phone. Robin was born in Hollywood, at about the time I became a story analyst. When we drove to the hospital, the nurse who examined Deborah said she was not quite ready and suggested we go into the parking lot and make out in the car. We did, and Robin was born soon after. Her godparents were Bill and Joan D'Angelo. Bill, one of my oldest and closest friends in L.A., died recently, and I miss his presence. I remember he had a car that looked good, a '57 Chevy, but kept breaking down in the middle of the street, and he'd get out, kick it a few times, and pace back and forth, waving his arms in the air, yelling, "Why me?" at the traffic he backed up, while I struggled not to die laughing. When we met, Bill and I were apprentice film editors at ABC Television at Prospect and Telemage in Hollywood. Neither of us wanted to become editors. It was just an opportunity to break into the business. And from what we could see, our jobs had little to do with editing anyhow, because all we did all day was inspect old prints of TV shows syndicated to local stations and wind them off the reels into plastic cores for storage. When we found torn sprocket holes, we trimmed them out and re-glued the ends. If the prints were ever circulated again, unsuspecting viewers would be subjected to horrible jump cuts in the action. We attacked those prints without mercy. There were 8 or 10 of us working in what amounted to a corrugated tin shack. It was drafty, wet winter, The rain pelted down on the tin roof in an endless rhythm, and the icy wind crept through the cracks of the tin. We shivered and cranked the rewind machine handles, and smoked and laughed and cursed and plotted the overthrow of the network. But when, one by one, some of us were laid off, we felt genuine remorse. I became producer when Susan was born, 3 weeks late, on my boss Howie Horwitz's birthday. I picked Deborah and the baby up at the hospital in a new blue Comet station wagon, and we stopped on the way home to show her off to the Horowitzes, whom we'd asked to be her godparents. Howie was a friend and mentor and taught me a great deal, like never talk to the actors, they'll kill you. On Friday nights, we were obliged to show up at Howie and Harriet's to have supper and watch our show 77 Sunset Strip. It didn't matter that by then we'd seen it a dozen times in one form or another. Fridays at Howie's was traditional. Sometimes one or more of the actors joined us, mostly Roger Smith, who co-starred on the show with Ephraim Zimbalist, and Ed Kooky Burns. Roger phoned me the night before we started production on the episode that was to be my maiden voyage to tell me not to worry. He'd hit himself in the jaw with a hammer while he was fixing his garden gate that afternoon, and his face was pretty swollen. But he'd be there the next day on the stage, bright and early, ready for work. Frankly, I told him, this is a lousy joke. Next day on the stage, bright and early, as the crew drifted in, I waited for Roger to show, or not show up. The shooting call was, as usual, 7 for 8, meaning set up at 7 and start shooting at 8. That happened rarely. It was usually closer to 9 or later, especially if there were actresses who needed 6 o'clock calls for hair and makeup. They were almost always slow to arrive on set. In due course, at the last minute, just before 8, Roger showed up. His jaw was swollen, out to here, but somehow managed a warm smile. He'd hit himself in the jaw with a hammer while fixing his garden gate. You may know that films usually shoot out of continuity, so that all the script material that takes place in one location can be shot at one time. Otherwise, masses of people and equipment would have to be moved back and forth. Actors, directors, and crews are used to it, but sometimes circumstances like swollen jaws can complicate the procedure. Anyway, our production schedule was for 6 days, and we shot out of continuity as usual, and every day Roger's swelling went down out of continuity. My maiden voyage was a nightmare, except for Susan's timely arrival. At the film labs, timers balanced the color of prints from shot to shot, scene to scene. On one occasion, a well-meaning technician timed the jaundice right out of a bold one's patient, whom we'd gone to a great deal of trouble to make up appropriately as his condition worsened, out of continuity, throughout the episode. The poor timer, so proud at first of his ability to correct our mistake, had to redo the whole process. Otherwise, our patient would have looked too healthy to be in the Craig Institute, our fictional hospital, in the first place. I must say, in retrospect, our histories with our daughter's boyfriends were anything but boring. Let's take Tom Alfieri, Melissa's first husband, whom she met at UC Irvine and who moved in with us when they graduated. Tom is dark, handsome, bright, Italian, and eccentric. I used to call him the Italian stallion, with mixed emotions. The deal was that while Melissa was living back home with us and getting her master's degree, Tom would build a room for himself down in the oversized garage below the pool, use one of the bathrooms in our house, and have meals with us, and look for a job. I'm reasonably bright, a college graduate, but I actually bought that. What really happened was that the room never got built. Tom moved into the house with Melissa, took over the abandoned chicken coop as his outdoor office and spiritual sanctuary, and refused to allow anyone in that part of our backyard, about 1/4 of an acre of our property. At least with the chickens, we'd had access. When Tom and Melissa decided to get married, they sought out a rabbi and a priest to do the honors. At the last minute, literally the morning of the evening of the wedding, after sundown as is traditional in Judaism, the priest canceled. His bishop had returned to town unexpectedly and put the kibosh on his participation. To the credit of Tom and his family, we'd only just met his parents and liked them very much, who'd come in for the ceremony, it apparently made little or no difference. When I called Tom at the house he and Melissa had rented to warn him that there'd be no priest at the ceremony, he said, "Don't bother me, I have a wedding to go do," and hung up. The rabbi rose to the occasion, satisfying all parties during the service. The reception was to be on our patio. It poured rain that day, and I asked the local Holiday Inn management to allow us to bring the entire event into one of their banquet rooms, without using any of their catering services. The woman I spoke with said it was unheard of, but she was sympathetic. Filled with pride, I told Deborah and Melissa, looking beautiful in her wedding dress, what I had accomplished, expecting at least a standing ovation. Instead, I got frustration and tears. The reception took place on our patio after all, with makeshift plastic sheeting tenting the proceedings and sheltering the obliging, increasingly damp guests. I spent most of the time with a broom, poking at the overhead puddles which formed in the plastic to disperse the water and rearranging strategically placed kitchen containers and buckets. There was a lot of milling about among the guests. Some of them stuck it out at soggy tables, others ducked inside. I was preoccupied, but I heard later that the reception was a big success. Tom and Melissa gave us our oldest granddaughter, thoughtful and lovely Samandi Rose. Her father is nothing if not inventive, and Melissa has our mischievous musical grandson Seth from her second marriage to Bruce Honig. Melissa is very bright, capable, incisive, and spiritual. She's been a speech and language pathologist for more than 20 years, currently with the Ross Valley School District in Marin County, and has a private practice. We recently received a warm note praising Melissa's accomplishments from one of her principals. My precious, sensitive middle daughter, Robin, had a 15-year relationship with Michael, who's also very bright, literate, and credentialed. She was apparently uncertain about marrying him, although I gather he was quite willing. They produced another grandson, the wonderful and mysterious Benjamin. The deal with them was that the couple would live with us after Tom and Melissa moved out, while they both continued their college educations, alternating work and school schedules between them. Again, inexplicably, I ignored the reality. As of now, Michael has at least 2 master's degrees, is married, and has a baby boy and a stepdaughter. Robin is single, still a few credits short of her bachelor's degree, and has always worked. She became a certified nutritionist and product development executive in the health food industry, has had a number of excellent jobs, and dotes on 14-year-old Benjamin, who seems much older and almost as tall as his father. Wherever she goes, her reputation precedes her. New associates frequently greet her with, "Oh, so you're the Robin." Robin is the Miss Pliskin of our family. Miss P, whom I used to suspect was apocryphal, was apparently Bubby's cousin by marriage, and always looked on the bright side, smoothing things over if there was any conflict. That's our gentle Robin. Curiously, Kurt Russell played Snake Plissken in John Carpenter's cult classic Escape from New York. Before they moved in with us, Robin and Michael shared an apartment in Sonoma where they were going to school at Sonoma State. We visited them there, as did our younger Susan, but when they came to our house I pointed them to separate bedrooms in opposite directions. They complied, with reasonable good humor. I wanted them to set a good example for Susan. Each time she just looked at me and rolled her eyes. Susan has always been spirited and independent. She's the best bargain shopper in the family. Samandi's a close second. Susan's been married for almost 10 contented years to her witty and mellow husband John, and is a great mother, devoted to their daughters, Catherine and Michaela. She's a licensed medical assistant and masseuse, women and children only, and a talented artist and photographer. When she was a kid, she put her stuffed animals to sleep on her bed, so they'd be comfortable while she slept on the floor, and she made up an all-purpose word, physiologistal, as a description of extremes, used with so and to and very. During her early teens, when she was moody, I called her Clytemnestra. She was very annoyed with me later when she learned the origin. Recently, complaining about some cosmetic lotion she'd gotten into her eyes, she announced dryly, "As it turns out, I'm a lot more vain than any of us thought." Occasionally we dog sit with Susan and John's border collie, Molly. Susan says when that happens, she feels one of her heartbeats is missing. Our daughters have greatly challenged and rewarded us. Today, as adults, they are each decent, productive, loving human beings, and they remain each other's best friends. It's hard to imagine our wonderful children and grandchildren They're all with us, thanks to the miraculous arithmetic of X's and Y's.